Welcome to the deep dive. So let's picture this. You're in the New Orleans Convention Center. There's this buzz, but it's tense, calculated almost. Not for a party, but for this really high-stakes political debate. And it became, well, according to our source today, a moment where some deeply buried truths started coming out. Today, we're really going to unpack that whole event. We'll explore how Senator John Kennedy, with just, a quiet determination in the stack of files, confronted Senator Adam Schiff. And how, as our source puts it, this confrontation exposed a pattern of actions affecting, well, countless people. Our mission here is to understand what happened, that shift, and what it tells us about accountability, truth, and maybe the power of just one person's story. All our insights today are pulled from excerpts from a really compelling source material, The Quiet Reckoning, Kennedy's Truth Unleashed. Okay, so let's jump right in. The book, The Quiet Reckoning, it sets the scene so vividly, right? These two key players, Schiff and Kennedy. How did their very different approaches right off the bat set the tone?
It's pretty striking, isn't it? The source describes Adam Schiff coming out, big presence, booming laugh, shaking hands, even makes a joke about the Louisiana stage lights, flashing thumbs up. Pure performance, as the book calls it. Designed to command the space.
Total showman approach.
Exactly. And then you contrast that with Kennedy backstage. Cold waiting room, suit maybe a bit wrinkled, glasses on his nose, but composed, just holding the stack of files. And when they asked if he's ready, the book says he just replied, "I've been ready for a while."
Quiet confidence.
Right. It immediately signaled these two totally different game plans. One was about the show, the control, the other substance. Quiet confidence in the homework he'd done.
And then the moderator lays out the rules. 2 hours, no interruptions. That must have just cranked up the tension.
Oh, absolutely. It set the stage for, well, a clash you couldn't really avoid.
And you could feel that clash right away, couldn't you? Kennedy opens up, speaks calmly, barely moving his lips, according to the source, saying something like, political failure rarely starts with the people, it starts at the top. Deals that benefit a few. The source notes the quiet weight of those words.
Yeah, just lets him hang there. But Schiff jumps right in, dismissive. The book says he mocked Kennedy, asking, what's he done, just talk, pushing his own experience.
And this is where it gets interesting, strategically, how Kennedy responded, or maybe didn't respond immediately.
Well, what's fascinating, and the source points this out, is Kennedy almost seemed to let Schiff underestimate him. He let the noise pass.
Right.
Schiff kept going, pointing at the audience, saying things like, you don't need a lecture from someone who just reads from desk papers, trying to belittle the files even. How cute. You do it with guts.
Guts versus papers.
Exactly. But Kennedy, still unflustered, just kept bringing it back to facts, stagnant wages, election instability, disproportionate harm, and then that quiet retort. You can use guts, but without reason, you'll lead the country off a cliff. That actually got applause, the source says.
Ah, okay. So an early sign the audience was maybe looking for more than just bluster.
Precisely. It showed the power of that calm, factual pushback against the louder rhetoric. Kennedy was letting Schiff kind of dig his own hole, maybe.
Okay, so the debate moves on, and it hits this point about leadership ethics, accountability. And this is where, well, things really shift gear, don't they?
They really do. Schiff, as the book describes, is batting away what he calls witch hunts, fabricated stories, listing grievances, FBI, social media bans, lawsuits.
Standard defensive stuff, maybe.
Kind of, but then almost casually, he drops this line. The source says it rang like an alarm bell for Kennedy.
What was the line?
Schiff says, I've settled a few things because it was easier, not because I was wrong. Sometimes you just cut a check and move on. Big politicians do it all the time. It means nothing.
Wow. Cut a check and move on.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
It really is. And it raises that big question, right? What does that say about your ethics if settling isn't about fault, it's just convenience? A way to dodge scrutiny.
And how does that land with regular people who can't just cut a check?
Exactly. And the source highlights Kennedy's reaction. Very subtle, just rests his fingers on his files, doesn't open them yet.
Waiting for the opening.
Seems like it. Because when he's asked about compromising behavior, he draws this stark contrast. He talks about everyday folks. Most folks don't have the luxury of settling things quietly. Landlord raises rent, boss cuts hours, no press release, you tighten your belt.
Bringing it down to earth.
Totally. Then he connects it back. So when someone like him treats a compromise like a receipt, yes, I think that matters.
And the book says this was delivered with just raw honesty. No theatrics.
No shouting, no theatrics, just raw honesty, the kind people don't forget, is how the source puts it. And it notes Schiff showed a flicker of irritation.
The first crack, maybe?
Could be. The source even mentions an audience member, a man in a blue jacket just getting up and leaving. Not rushed, not angry, just done.
Hmm. So that one casual comment from Schiff really opened the door. It struck a nerve, and Kennedy saw his moment.
It seems that way. That comment provided the perfect pivot for Kennedy to finally open those files he'd been holding on to.
And that's when he starts. The book says he begins to give voice to a name long forgotten. But first, he makes it personal, doesn't he?
He does. He talks about his dad's grocery store in Baton Rouge, about trust and empty promises from Washington. Says, "My father never really recovered. I carry that memory every time I vote, every time I speak." Powerful stuff.
Sets the stage for why this matters to him.
Right. Then he looks at Schiff and says, some of us don't have the option to cut a check and move on. In the source notes, Schiff actually looked away then.
Okay. And then the files come out properly.
Yes, systematically. He starts naming names, pulling out documents. David. Lost his job on a California project Schiff backed. Ignored, sued, ran out of money, settled, but had to stay silent.
But Kennedy could speak for him.
Kennedy's line was, "But I'm not David and I can speak." Then Mary, fired while on sick leave. Thomas, contractor, underpaid, settled for half. Sarah, Shreveport, discrimination after reporting unsafe conditions, settled with a gag clause.
Wow. One after another.
He laid it out. Each case tells a story about how power is used not to build but to silence. That was his indictment, according to the source.
And he connects it to Schiff's character, right? What happens behind closed doors.
Exactly. Tells the moderator, when someone shows who they are in closed rooms with no cameras, that's who they'll bring to the floor of Congress.
How did Schiff react to that direct assault?
Tried to laugh it off, the book says, brush it off as just common practice. But Kennedy's reply cut deep. There's a difference between hushing someone and crushing them.
Oof.
And the book describes this profound shift, the way truth seeps into a room. It wasn't just random stories, it was building a case, piece by piece.
Yeah, showing a pattern. Silence is currency, eroding trust, especially for people without power.
That's exactly the picture the source paints. Kennedy meticulously connecting the dots.
And he kept going. The book says his stack of files was getting thinner, but each page felt heavy, like a stone. He mentions a staffer, Mark.
Yes, Mark. From Schiff's House Intelligence Committee staff, the source says Mark sent an internal email in 2019 warning about pushing the Trump-Russia narrative without clear evidence.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, told to stay quiet. Then, according to the source, lost his job, his life fell apart, family, finances, everything. Kennedy even held up a newspaper article, the Oakland Tribune, to back it up.
That's specific. And then the Veterans Project. That sounds particularly tough.
It was devastating, the way the book describes it. A nonprofit in Fresno, helping veterans with addiction, PTSD, backed by Schiff's policies. But their land lease. Terminated early, relocation was promised, but Kennedy stated, you didn't follow through.
What happened to them?
The source says half of them ended up in shelters, 3 died within months. One was Henry. His son is watching tonight.
Oh, man. The book says the room just froze.
Completely froze. Kennedy's conclusion was just blunt. These aren't mistakes. This is a pattern.
How did Schiff handle that? Accusing him of making him the villain.
Yeah, Schiff tried to deflect, saying Kennedy was just picking documents to make him look bad. But Kennedy's comeback was quiet, steady. I'm not trying to make you a villain, I'm just making the victims visible.
Making the victims visible. That's powerful. The source mentions a murmur in the crowd.
A murmur of reflection, yeah. Like, people were really processing the human cost being laid bare.
And this really forces that question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Beyond the politics, how do we hold leaders accountable for the human impact of their decisions? Especially when it hits vulnerable communities hardest.
Absolutely. Kennedy's approach, as the source shows it, forced everyone to look past the policy debates and see the faces, the lives affected. It wasn't abstract anymore.
And the book gives more examples. Shreveport?
The Shreveport Community Relocation Program, heavily promoted policy Schiff supported. Over 80 families signed up, sold their homes.
Sounds promising.
Until the funding dried up, the partner pulled out, and you were gone. That's how Kennedy put it. Many lost deposits. One man died trying to get his money back. His daughter is here tonight.
Another gut punch. And Kennedy's line was,
You take credit for the promise, abandon the reality, just searing.
And he used Schiff's own words against him, too,
Yeah.
from a transcript.
Yeah, from a 2019 Sacramento hearing. Schiff was apparently asked about complaints regarding a policy and testified, "That's not my problem, that's for local agencies."
Ouch.
Kennedy pounced. Leadership isn't blaming others when it's convenient. Leadership is taking responsibility, especially when it's hard.
Drawing a clear line about what leadership means. And there's another staffer mentioned.
Nathan,
Yeah, another former Intelligence Committee staffer. His email, according to the source, warned the committee was exaggerating Trump-Russia evidence for political gain.
same pattern as Mark. What happened to Nathan? Fired. And the book adds a tragic detail. Died kidney failure, couldn't afford treatment. His wife now works as a hotel receptionist. Kennedy's final line on that was chilling. People like Nathan don't get breaks.
So this relentless presentation of story after story, document after document, what was the cumulative effect described in the book?
It completely dismantled the showmanship, according to The Quiet Reckoning. It exposed the limits of that approach when faced with, well, documented reality. The public image crumbled under the weight of these personal impacts.
How did Schiff finally react? He tried to dismiss them as old disputes.
He did, but Kennedy had that devastatingly simple reply ready. Tell that to Henry's son.
Silence.
Pretty much. The source describes Schiff losing it then. Not composure exactly, but his voice trembled. Not with anger, not with confidence, but with something else. He faltered, stumbled. Aides had to escort him off stage.
Wow. A complete collapse. And Kennedy.
Just calm, unflinching, closed his files. No theatrics, the book says, just a quiet end to a long chain of silences.
The aftermath must have been intense. What did Kennedy say right after?
His immediate remarks were powerful, too. I didn't come here to make anyone stumble. I came because too many have already fallen.
Framing it not as an attack, but as advocacy.
Exactly. He clarified his intent. I didn't spend weeks preparing this file to create a moment like this. I did it because someone has to speak the truth where it can't be edited or buried in fine print.
And privately, to his campaign manager.
The book quotes him saying, "That was the moment. Not the stumble, not the collapse, not the exit from the stage. That was it." Meaning, the truth landing was the real moment.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And the media reaction. Instantaneous?
Immediate and huge, according to the source. Clips went viral. The Kennedy moment, a reckoning. Fox, MSNBC, CNN, all covering it intensely. And viewer comments shifted dramatically. The book mentions things like, "I used to support him, but I can't defend tonight. Why didn't he answer about the veterans?"
So it transcended typical political point scoring. It became something bigger.
Yeah, the source argues it became a genuine moment of accountability, much faster and deeper than anyone expected.
What do you think that tells us about how truth can land, even in a noisy political world?
Well, what's really insightful here, based on the source, is how that quiet, persistent delivery, backed by facts, just cut through everything. No drama needed. Kennedy's understated style made the stories the focus, the human impact. It created this space for genuine reckoning that, spin couldn't touch. It showed the power of raw honesty plus meticulous evidence.
The book then goes deeper, right, into Kennedy's personal motivation, beyond just the debate stage.
It really does. It tries to get at the why. After the debate, he apparently skipped the usual debriefs, just wanted quiet time to think.
And it reveals a story about his cousin, Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy, in Monroe. Crushed by regulations from a policy Schiff backed, lost everything, store, house, wife left, died in a rented apartment. The source says only Kennedy and a car mechanic were at the funeral. Jimmy's daughter, Mary, now a single mom. Just devastating details.
Making it incredibly personal for Kennedy.
Absolutely. His conviction, quoted in the book, is clear. This isn't about politics. This isn't about parties or headlines. It's about people like Jimmy, he adds. I didn't say it loud. I just didn't let it stay buried.
So it wasn't about Schiff, ultimately. It was about Jimmy and Henry and Nathan.
That's the core argument the source makes, giving voice to the voiceless, people pushed aside by decisions made miles away in rooms they'd never enter.
And the book mentions support pouring in afterwards, letters.
Overwhelming support, including from Linda, who the source identifies as Henry's son. Wrote something like, "You said my dad's name. I didn't think anyone would. Thank you. I cried last night. I think my dad would be proud."
Oh, wow.
And maybe most movingly, a letter from a 10-year-old girl, Mia, said her mom told her to watch because Kennedy was brave and didn't yell. She says that's rare.
Yeah.
Mia's own dad had been hurt by not being paid, and she thanked Kennedy because I think you stood up for people like us.
Gets you right there. And Kennedy wrote a note to himself.
Just scribbled down, the source says. The truth isn't the loudest voice, it's the one still standing when others fall.
Hmm. And his public statement later echoed that.
Yeah, told a local news crew. Last night wasn't about political victory. It was about people, working people told their pain doesn't matter. If we want better, we have to call things by their name, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.
So that deeper dive really connects the personal drive to the public action, an ethical stand becoming really an act of advocacy for the overlooked.
Exactly. The source frames it as the personal fueling the political, transforming the whole event.
So stepping back, this deep dive into the New Orleans debate, all based on the quiet reckoning, it really throws a spotlight on this constant demand, doesn't it? For transparency, for accountability from people in power.
Definitely. It underscores, just like the source meticulously lays out, how powerful individual stories can be, and the quiet strength of truth, even when everything around it is shouting.
And for you listening, these lessons, they might feel distant, political, but they can apply closer to home too. Maybe you're prepping for a big meeting or trying to understand a complex issue, or you're just curious. So a reminder maybe to question things, check sources, and think about the real-world impact behind the jargon or the headlines.
Yeah, considering the human element.
Exactly. The story of John Kennedy in those files, as told in this source, it suggests that honesty, sticking to the facts, and maybe just basic compassion, can change the conversation, can force a reckoning.
It makes you think.
It does. The truth isn't always the loudest thing you hear. Sometimes the source suggests it's about what's remembered and what we do with those memories. So a final thought to leave you with. What quiet truth, maybe long buried, might you have the power to uncover or help bring to light just by paying attention, listening, and maybe taking that first small action?